first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you for joining us. We are live here every weekday, starting around 1 p.m. from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. We're live streaming on our social media channels. We're on our website. We're on our app, which I highly recommend downloading that, the Fox 12 Oregon app. And we cover, as I mentioned, a wide range of topics here, if you didn't know. So thanks for tuning in. Today, we're talking about, well, something that's tomorrow, but really applies all the time. Tomorrow, according to the United Nations, is International Small Business Day. So we wanted to talk about that. And in particular, I've got some pretty interesting stats just about small businesses here in the area. We're going to get into what's on that lower third, but in case you didn't know, according to the Portland Metro Chamber of Commerce, 35% of all workers in Multnomah County currently work for a small business. That is a lot of people. And also, per the U.S. Small Business Association, this is a pretty amazing statistic. There are 397,422 small businesses in Oregon, and that comprises 99.4% of Oregon businesses are small businesses, will be classified as that. So that's a lot of small businesses here in this state, in this area. And one thing that is certainly true is that they are always at risk from cyber threats. This is something that's across the board, but today we wanted to focus on the small business aspect because of that day tomorrow, and to give everybody an idea of that, to walk through what some of those things are, the ever-changing world of cyber threats. We've got Tony Sabaj from Checkpoint. And Tony, thank you for joining us here today. You know, I think those are really interesting statistics, just knowing that and how many people are involved in I keep saying it, small businesses. But yeah, some of these threats that are happening, can you walk through what some of the biggest issues are that they're facing right now?
Sure. And, you know, as you said, small businesses make up a majority of many economies, and even more so in Multnomah County and Oregon. And, you know, small businesses, when there's security breaches in small businesses, they don't get the press and the notoriety, good or bad, that you see when a large company gets hacked or breached. But it happens more often in small businesses than it does in large businesses. And small businesses are somewhat at a disadvantage. They don't have the resources, a lot of times the money, to be able to protect themselves against cyber threats. And there's some things that small businesses can do to help mitigate those risks so they don't become a victim, and they do become, they're always a big target for cyber criminals.
Yeah, I would think so. You know, it's funny you mentioned that, you know, just the protection that some bigger businesses have, and yet they're being hacked all the time as well. We see it, you know, across the board. I just got an email from a very large business that told me their security was breached and that they may have taken my information. And this is a huge company. I won't say what it is, but, you know, it happens to them. But they have so many more resources, it seems like, to battle or to be able to fight some of that. So for small businesses, I would imagine, you know, if they get hacked, if some data gets stolen, I mean, that could be a really difficult thing to come back from.
Yeah, and, you know, depending on different studies, but they all kind of fall within the 50 to 75% range of most small businesses can't survive a successful ransomware attack. And, you know, the average cost of a security breach in a small business is around $25,000 to $30,000, which to a small business can very much bankrupt them. So there's a much bigger risk to small businesses when they do get breach from a cyber attack, and even a bigger business that can absorb you know, even some of the large numbers you see being reported on.
So what are some things that they can do? I guess before we even get into that, can we talk about what some of the things are? You mentioned ransomware attacks. What are some of the biggest threats?
So some of the biggest threats to small businesses are, you know, as I mentioned, ransomware and phishing attacks, which is usually done via email. It could be done via text messaging or you know, even QR codes, but usually done via email. And that's really the first step of almost any attack, whether it's on a small business or large enterprise, is usually like 90 to 95% of all attacks start with a phishing attack, meaning an email is sent to somebody where they're impersonating or they're getting somebody to click on a link or download software or give up information to a third party that is untrusted, that then starts the eventual cyber attack. So that's probably the number one concern for small businesses is phishing. And since many small businesses kind of run their email a lot of times on consumer or even personal kind of grade email, they may not have some of the protections that you would get in a larger organization or corporation.
So this is just for an example for phishing, the type of email where you may get, and I've seen them here too, where you get somebody from management or saying, hey, I need you to click on this right away or fill this out, and masking that name. So somebody does that, and then
or even a third party, like many small businesses use online resources for whether it be accounting or those types of things. They could be using an internet service, and it's a phishing email from their accounting software saying, hey, you need to change your password, and then they click on a link and they change their password, but they're really not changing their password. They're giving up their password to an attacker that then gets into some of these third-party systems. So even more dangerous than just impersonating the CEO or CFO or manager.
And so once they do that, they get in, somebody clicks that link for whatever reason, they just weren't paying attention. So then those companies, the bad actors, the hackers can then get into the system and steal their data, hold them up for ransom. Is that generally what they do?
Yeah, and usually with phishing, they're usually searching for credentials or passwords,
okay.
Or they're getting you to install some type of malware onto your system that is then normally connected to the to the business's system that can then spread and steal more information.
And for small businesses, as you've mentioned, that could be completely devastating. That could be a death blow, having that kind of money, being threatened there. So so that's one of the big ones. Are there other ones other than that people should be concerned with?
So yeah, phishing is the biggest one, and also keeping your password safe in general, even if they're not done via phishing link. But using strong passwords, using two-factor authentication. We see a lot of organizations use very simple ID password combinations to get into sites, so those can be cracked or guessed even without being tricked into giving up information. So doing things like two-factor authentication, using strong passwords, password managers, not sharing passwords, in addition to having, endpoint security on all the devices that are touching your business. A lot of small businesses don't have huge networks that they can put a lot of security into. So putting security as close to the end user as possible with things like a really good endpoint security platform.
And that's something, I know there's probably a lot of people watching, as we just mentioned, of how many people are employed by small businesses or own them, probably don't necessarily think of that or think of themselves as, somebody who could become a victim of that. So this sounds like that's not too stressful of a way to get some of that protection that they may need.
Yeah, and one of the things we're starting to see a lot more of, and this is a trend that is rising, is that obviously with the skills gap and the cybersecurity skill shortage in the market today, is we're seeing a lot of small businesses and even medium-sized and small enterprises actually start to really rely on managed service providers to be able to provide the cybersecurity for them. They have the ability to buy the tooling and have the right people and be able to service multiple customers with less resources than if all those organizations did it themselves. And they can usually have the experts that a small business isn't going to be able to afford, and really rely on a trusted managed service provider, even if it's just to do security monitoring or incident response in case you do have an issue. It's a good way that's much less expensive than trying to do it yourself, is really relying on a good managed security service provider.
And something that I would think would probably end up being financially worth it, because I can tell you just from working at small businesses and anybody who's ever done anything like that, you'd only have so much time and expertise, and to learn all of that, that seems like that would be exhausting, to figure out how to manage all of that stuff. So that's a good tip. Any other tips and tricks that you have for some of these small businesses out here?
Yeah, and really it's, if you're using security software, which they all should be doing, is making sure you're keeping it up to date. The security software is only as good as its latest updates, and making sure that the software that you're using and the tools that you're using are are kept current because the cybersecurity landscape is always changing. There's a lot of good freeware tools out there, but a lot of times they don't get the same updates as you would get with more of a commercial or paid for product. And this is where the managed security service provider can make sure that the tools that you're using are kept up to date, and you're not just installing security software and setting and forgetting it and then thinking you're protected because in a month or a week a signature based tool is going to be out of date and not really protecting you against the latest threats.
And that is true because those are constantly evolving, I would imagine.
Right. And using two-factor authentication for your passwords is another huge and usually fairly inexpensive step. So instead of just using Greg Nibbler at gmail.com and a password, using some type of two-factor authentication, whether it's as simple as a text message or Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. So even if your passwords are compromised, people can't use them because they need to have that secondary authentication, that text message code or number from your Google or Microsoft Authenticator, or even getting a little bit more advanced of having a hardware token that generates a code that you have to put in order to authenticate to different external and internal systems.
Yeah, two-factor authentication is pretty much what you need for everything, I would imagine, at this point. Yeah. Well, Tony, thank you very much, for joining us to talk about this. Anything else that you think is important for people to know?
No, just stay safe, and a lot of SMB, a lot of small businesses think that they're too small to be attacked, and a vast majority of cyber attacks are against small and medium businesses because a lot of times they are an easier target than some of the larger corporations with more resources.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Is people just think that they're not coming after me. They wouldn't be doing that. I'm not a giant corporation or a hotel chain or a casino or something like that. But yeah, that's they have the time to go after the small businesses too. So, well, Tony, thank you very much, for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time, and always good to talk to you.
All right, thanks, Greg.
And for everybody watching too, this is Fox 12 Now. So if this is your first time, I always say this. Thanks for joining us. We do live stream here throughout the afternoon. We cover a wide range of topics on this show. You can watch all of those segments. Go to kptv.com, click on the Fox 12 Now tab, or download the Fox 12 Oregon app on whatever platform you're on. I always recommend those because then you have it right there on whatever you watch on. Coming up here later on today at 2 p.m., we're going to be talking to the Oregon Zoo about some money they are giving out for conservatorships across the world. Actually, they're helping out a lot. We're going to be talking about rhinos, polar bears, pangolins. So all that's coming up too. That's at 2 p.m. And of course, if there's breaking news, we will have that right here as well. Anytime between 1 and 4 p.m. You can join in for Fox 12 Now. We'll give you an alert and we'll let you know what's going on. But for right now, I'm going to sign off. I'll talk to you soon. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.